Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai Mishapad, Brahmhamsa Parijakacarya, Satarasata Shri Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. Jai Mishapad, Brahmhamsa Parijakacarya, Satarasata Shri Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Shri Prabhupada ki. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 2, The Dynasties of the Sons of Manu. Verse 25. Vivimshate suto rambha kani netrosya dharmika karandamo maharaja tasya sid atmajo nripa. Vivimshate suto rambha kani netrosya dharmika karandamo maharaja tasya sid atmajo nripa. Ramba Netro Dharmika Karandamo Maharaja Tasya Siratmajo Matajis. Word-to-word translation. Vivimshate, from Vivimshati. Sutaha, the son. Rambaha, named Ramba. Khaninetra, named Khaninetra. Asya, of Ramba. Dharmika, very religious. Karandama, named Karandama. Maharaja, O king. Tasya, of him. Khaninetra. Asit, was. Atmaja, the son. Nripa, O king. Translation. The son of Vivimshati was Ramba, whose son was the great and religious king Khaninetra. O king, the son of Khaninetra was King Karandama. So we're going to read quite a few verses because there are no purports to most of them. Text 26. Tasya vikshit suto yasya maruttas chakravartya bhut samvarto ayajayat yamvai mahayogyangira sutta. From Karandama came a son named Avikshit, and from Avikshit a son named Marutta, who was the emperor. The great mystic Samvarta, the son of Angira, engaged Marutta in performing a sacrifice yagya. Text 27. Maruttasya yatha yagyo na tathanyosti kaschana sarvam hiranmayam tvasit yat kinchit chasya shobhanam. The sacrificial paraphernalia of King Marutta was extremely beautiful, for everything was made of gold. Indeed, no other sacrifice could compare to his. Amadyat Indra Somena Dakshinabir Dvijataya Marutta Pariveshtaro Vishwe Deva Sabha Sada. In that sacrifice, King Indra became intoxicated by drinking a large quantity of Somarasa. The Brahmanas received ample contributions and therefore they were satisfied. For that sacrifice, the various demigods who control the winds offered foodstuffs, and Vishwadevas were members of the assembly. Purport. Because of the yajna performed by Marutta, everyone was pleased, especially the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. Brahmanas are interested in receiving contributions as priests, and Kshatriyas are interested in drinking. All of them, therefore, were satisfied with their different engagements. Text 29. Maruttasya dama putras tasya sid rajya vardhana sudritis tat suto jagye saudrite yo nara sutta. Maruta's son was Dama. Dama's son was Rajya Vardhana. Rajavardhana's son was Sudriti, and his son was Nara. That's text 30. Tat sutta kevalas tasmad dunduman vegavams tataha buddhas tasya bhavatas yasya trina bindur mahipati. The son of Nara was Kevala, and his son was Dunduman, whose son was Vegavan. Vegavan's son was Buddha, and Buddha's son was Trina Bindu, who became the king of this earth. Tambeje lambusha devi bhajaniya gunalayam varapsara yatah putra kanya chelavila bhavat. The best of the Apsaras, the highly qualified girl named Alambusha, accepted the similarly qualified Trinabindu as her husband. She gave birth to a few sons and a daughter known as Ilavila. Yasyam utpadayam asa vishrava dhanadam sutam pradaya vidyam paramam rishir yogeshwarah pitu. After the great saint Vishrava, the master of mystic yoga, received absolute knowledge from his father, he begot in the womb of Ilavila the greatly celebrated son known as Kuvera, the giver of money. Text 33. Vishala Shunya Bandhuscha Dhumraketuscha Tatsuta Vishalo Vamsha Krit Raja Vaishalim Nirmame Purim. Trinabindu had three sons named Vishala, Shunyabandhu, and Dhumraketu. Among these three, Vishala created a dynasty and constructed a palace called Vaishali. Hemachandra Sutastasya Dhumrakshas Tasya Chatmaja Tatputrat Samyamat Asit Krishashva Sahadevaja. The son of Vishala was known as Hemachandra, and his son was Dhumraksha, and his son was Samyama, whose sons were Devaja and Krishashva. Krishashvat Somadatto Bhut Yosva Medher Idapspatim Ishtva Purusham Apagryam Gatim Yogeshwara Shritam Somadattis tu Sumatis Tatputro Janamejaya Ete Vaishala Bhupalas Trinabindor Yashodhara. The son of Krishashva was Somadatta, who performed Ashwamedha sacrifices and thus satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. By worshipping the Supreme Lord, he achieved the most exalted post, a residence on the planet to which great mystic yogis are elevated. The son of Somadatta was Sumati, whose son was Janamejaya. All these kings appearing in the dynasty of Vishala properly maintained the celebrated position of King Trinabindu. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 2nd chapter of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, entitled The Dynasties of the Sons of Manu. Chapter 3. The Marriage of Sukanya and Cyavana Muni. Chapter summary. This chapter describes the dynasty of Sharyati, another son of Manu, and also tells about Sukanya and Revati. Devagya, Sharyati, Sharyati gave instructions about what to do in the ritualistic ceremony observed on the second day of the yajna of the Angirasas. One day, Sharyati, along with his daughter known as Sukanya, went to ashram of Cyavana Muni. There, Sukanya saw two glowing substances within a hole of earthworms, and by chance she pierced those two glowing substances. As soon as she did this, blood began to ooze from that hole. Consequently, King Sharyati and his companions suffered from constipation and inability to pass urine. When the king asked why circumstances had suddenly changed, he found that Sukanya was the cause of this misfortune. Then they all offered prayers to Cyavana Muni just to satisfy him according to his own desire. And Devagya Sharyati offered his daughter to Cyavana Muni, who was a very old man. When the heavenly physicians, the Ashwini Kumara brothers, once visited Cyavana Muni, the Muni requested them to give him back his youth. These two physicians took Cyavana Muni to a particular lake in which they bathed and regained full youth. After this, Sukanya could not distinguish her husband. She then surrendered unto the Ashwini Kumaras, who were very satisfied with her chastity and who therefore introduced her again to her husband, Cyavana Muni. Cyavana Muni then engaged King Sharyati in performing the Soma Yajna and gave the Ashwini Kumaras the privilege to drink Somarasa. The king of heaven, Lord Indra, became very angry at these, but he could do no harm to Sharyati. Henceforward, the Ashwini Kumara physicians were able to share in the Somarasa. Sharyati later had 3 sons named Uttanabarhi, Anartha, and Burishena. Anartha had 1 son whose name was Revata. Revata had 100 sons, of whom the eldest was Kakudmi. Kakudmi was advised by Lord Brahma to offer his beautiful daughter Revati to Baladev, who belongs to the Vishnu Tattva category. After doing this, Kakudmi retired from family life and entered the forest of Badrikashram to execute austerities and penances. Text 1. Sri Shuka Uvacha Sharyati Manavo Raja Brahmistha Sambhabhuvaha Yova Angira Samsatre Dvitiyam Ahar Uchivan. Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued, O King Sharyati, another son of Manu, was a ruler completely aware of Vedic knowledge. He gave instructions about the functions for the second day of the yajna to be performed by the descendants of Angira. Sukanya nama tasyasit kanya kamalalochana tayasardam vanagato hiyagamach Cyavana. Sharyati had a beautiful lotus-eyed daughter named Sukanya, with whom he went to the forest to see the ashram of Cyavana Muni. Text 3. Sa sakhibi parivrita vichinvantyangripan vane valmika randre dadrishe khadyote iva jyotishi. While that Sukanya, surrounded by her friends, was collecting various types of fruits from the trees in the forest, she saw within the hole of an earthworm 2 things glowing like luminaries. Te deva chodita bala jyotishi kantakena vai avidyan mugdha bhavena sushrava shrik tato bahi. As if induced by providence, the girl ignorantly pierced those 2 glowworms with a thorn, and when they were pierced, blood began to ooze out of them. Text 5. Sakrin mutra nirodho bhut sainikanam cha tat kshanat rajarshis tam upalakshya purushan vismito bravit. Thereupon, all the soldiers of Sharyati were immediately obstructed from passing urine and stool. Upon perceiving these, Sharyati spoke to his associates in surprise. Text 6. Apiya badram na yushmabhir bhargavasya vicheshtitam vyaktam kenapi nastasya kritam ashramadushanam. How strange is it that one of us has attempted to do something wrong to Cyavana Muni, the son of Bhrigu. It certainly appears that someone among us has polluted this ashram. Text 7. Sukanya praha pitaram bhita kinchit kritam maya dve jyotishi ajhanantya nirbhinne kantake navai. Being very much afraid, the girl Sukanya said to her father, I have done something wrong, for I have ignorantly pierced these 2 luminous substances with a thorn. Text 8. Duhitus tatvacha shrutva sharyati jata sadvasa munim prasadayam asa valmikantarahitam shane. After hearing this statement by his daughter, King Sharyati was very much afraid. In various ways, he tried to appease Cyavana Muni, for it was he who sat within the hole of the earthworm. Text 9. Tat abhiprayam agyaya pradat duhitaram mune krishran muktastam amantrya puram prayat samahita. Translation. King Saryati, being very contemplative and thus understanding Cyavana Muni's purpose, gave his daughter in charity to the sage. Thus released from danger with great difficulty, he took permission from Cyavana Muni and returned home. Purport. The king, after hearing the statement of his daughter, certainly told the great sage Cyavana Muni everything about how his daughter had ignorantly committed such an offense. The Muni, however, inquired from the king whether the daughter was married. In this way, the king, understanding the purpose of the great sage Cyavana Muni, Tat Abhiprayam Agyaya, immediately gave the Muni his daughter in charity and escaped the danger of being cursed. Thus, with the permission of the great sage, the king returned home. We'll read the next verse as well because it says bigger purport. Text 10. Sukanya chavanam prapya patim paramalo kopanam prinayam asachittagya apramatta nuvrittibhi. Cyavana Muni was very irritable, but since Sukanya had gotten him as her husband, she dealt with him carefully, according to his mood. Knowing his mind, she performed service to him without being bewildered. Purport. This is an indication of the relationship between husband and wife. A great personality like Cyavana Muni has the temperament of always wanting to be in a superior position. Such a person cannot submit to anyone. Therefore, Cyavana Muni had an irritable temperament. His wife, Sukanya, could understand his attitude, and under the circumstances, she treated him accordingly. If any wife wants to be happy with her husband, she must try to understand her husband's temperament and please him. This is victory for a woman. Even in the dealings of Lord Krishna with his different queens, it has been seen that although the queens were the daughters of great kings, they placed themselves before Lord Krishna as his maidservants. However great a woman may be, she must place herself before her husband in this way. That is to say, she must be ready to carry out her husband's orders and please him in all circumstances. Then her life will be successful. When the wife becomes as irritable as the husband, their life at home is sure to be disturbed or ultimately completely broken. In the modern day, the wife is never submissive, and therefore home life is broken even by slight incidents. Either the wife or the husband may take advantage of the divorce laws. According to the Vedic law, however, there is no such thing as divorce laws, and a woman must be trained to be submissive to the will of her husband. Westerners contend that this is a slave mentality for the wife, but factually it is not. It is the tactic by which a woman can conquer the heart of her husband, however irritable or cruel he may be. In this case, we clearly see that although Cyavana Muni was not young, but indeed old enough to be Sukanya's grandfather, and was also very irritable, Sukanya, the beautiful girl daughter of a king, submitted herself to her old husband and tried to please him in all respects. Thus, she was a faithful and chaste wife. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we're reading now this particular pastime of Cyavana Muni and Sukanya. And this is an interesting topic. I can just repeat based on what I've heard. Because it's a very, very unusual circumstance, because in this case of Cyavana Muni and how he was irritated, and he actually asked the king, because king was so apologetic. So Cyavana Muni asked, is your daughter already married? And the king understood that the Cyavana Muni actually wants to get married to his daughter, and so therefore he did what would please the sage. However, Sukanya was almost the age, much, much younger than the sage. And so therefore, there was a lot of difference. And also, to make things even more complicated, Cyavana Muni was a very irritable sage. So Sukanya can naturally, complain, because coming from a very comfortable position, living in a king's palace, and always very looked after and pampered, and now she is going to have to live in the forest with this sage who is extremely irritable. So such is life. Sometimes it can get very complicated, beyond our control. So there's nothing much that we can do about it. And so here in the case of Sukanya, we can see that she was put into such circumstance, and she had all the right to complain that, why is this happening to me? I've been such a good daughter or whatever, and now why do I have to suffer? Why do I have to go through this situation? But actually, she accepted her situation with grace, and we can see how she's going to actually treat Cyavana Muni in a very nice way, with a very nice attitude. And Prabhupada points out in the purport here that according to the modern Western mentality, Prabhupada says that that this would look like a Prabhupada saying, this is slave mentality. This might look like a slave mentality for the wife. He said, why is she forced? Because in the modern times, any relationship, any circumstance, if there is no pleasure right now, if you're not happy right now, then just move on, no obligation, no duty, no commitment. Because the purpose of life is to be happy right now. So if you're not happy right now, then what's the point? So the whole reason why people get married these days is so that they can expand their sense enjoyment. And the other person is supposed to provide for them and provide for their gratification, and vice versa. So that's why Prabhupada says that you scratch my back and I scratch your back. That's the modern relationship. It's all about what I can get from the other person for my own enjoyment. And I'm happy to, and people are happy to continue or maintain the relationship with a little bit of a tolerance, because after all, they want to enjoy, and they see that there is some hope for happiness in the near future, so they might tolerate a little bit. But if they see that, okay, there is no happiness coming up, then they just tend to move on most often. And we have seen so many circumstances. I was talking to this one friend, and he was mentioning about him having to go through the whole process of separation, and it's so complicated. And because he was so suffocating and filled up, so he was just explaining what he's going through, and at the same time was also apologizing. Sorry, he said, I know this is, your ashram is quite different than mine, and I understand that this is a bit too much for you. And I was thankful to him for explaining, because it helps me also understand the situation and be a little bit detached. But he was mentioning about all the difficulties that he has to go through with and in terms of the property, in terms of the children, and he was saying that it's very complicated. It's very complicated. Just because, but they still want to just leave and move on because after all there is no happiness. He said, I can't find any happiness right now. So he said, so I just need to change. So that's a very modern mentality, that the whole life, all the relationships, not just husband and wife, friends, relationship with the friends is also like that, relationship with neighbors is also like that. Like in India, we know that at least a couple of decades ago, a few years ago, people had a very good relationship with each other, and even sometimes they don't get along well, we still learn to tolerate, and we try to, just as we understand that, okay, there's a relationship, somehow we have come together, and then there is some relationship, and we need to maintain that, and we can't just cut it off so easily. So there's some amount of responsibility, some amount of duty there, but it's definitely not seen in the modern times, and therefore there are a lot of complications. And so therefore, this famous saying of love at first sight and separation at the first fight, so very common, but it can be very confusing. So here we can see a very amazing example of Sukanya, and her, despite whatever her situation, she is able to put up with it, and actually she is able to have the right attitude, and that's something that's we can imbibe in our own life as well, because in different relationships we can, those who are married, they can apply into their own relationships, but also in a lot of other relationships, also in relationships with our spiritual master, with our gurus. That's also like that. It's a master and servant. So sometimes the master can be very strong, sometimes can be a bit harsh. Sometimes the disciple might think that, I'm doing everything for my spiritual master. Still, my spiritual master is always irritable. He's always angry. He's never glorifying me. He's never acknowledging me. He's never saying good things to me about how good I'm doing. And every time when I make a mistake, he straight away comes and points at it. So in that way, we can also think like this. But here is a very nice example of Sukanya, and that's the kind of mood that we should also imbibe of submission. And in that way, when this example Prabhupada gives here of the wife, and it's the same example for the disciple as well, is that when we imbibe that mood of submissive service attitude, then that makes the other person very happy. It's very easy to please, and it's actually not a sign of weakness, because again, in the modern times we are trained to not submit, to keep your chin high, and always, it's always an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Someone shouts at you, you got to shout back. You shouldn't just submit when someone doesn't act properly. So we have to give back. So that's kind of like the training that we always received. We shouldn't be humble, because otherwise there's a fear of getting trampled over. So therefore, but when it comes to Krishna consciousness, here we can see an attitude of humility and submission, where even though the other person in a relationship may not necessarily be very pleasant to work with or to deal with, we still understand that Krishna has put us in this circumstance, in this situation, for a reason, and rather than complaining, we can actually accept the situation, and we can accept that person, And we can actually see that maybe that person is in our life, so we can learn the humility and a submissive service attitude. So in Krishna consciousness, it's not about the services that we do, but it's the attitude that we have in the services that we do. That's the most important. And so therefore, when we have people like this in our lives, it's a good opportunity for us to cultivate this attitude. So we should be very grateful, actually, rather than complaining. Here you can see Sukanya, she didn't go and complain to her father, or she didn't go and complain, at least it's not written here in the verses, that why God is doing this to me, why Krishna is doing this to me, why my father did this to me, why Cyavana Muni is doing this to me. But she's actually she's exemplifying the best attitude in doing the service. And so yeah, it's very, very nice lesson for us, because when we are put in the similar situation, we should not try to run away from the situation, but we should actually try to cultivate the right attitude, the positive attitude. So sometimes the irritable can be the person, it could come across as certain devotees that we are doing service with, and sometimes they can be a bit difficult to work with. Sometimes the circumstances can be quite irritable, and we feel that Krishna is not really looking at us, or Krishna is not really attentive to our needs, or Krishna is not giving what we deserve, and therefore we are having to suffer this circumstance. But in all cases, if we can somehow or other maintain this attitude of submissive service, then actually it's easy to maintain the relationship, and it's easy to move forward in one's life. Of course, it's a different thing if the relationship is overly violent, but in many cases, with the right attitude, actually it can be continued. So rather than trying to change the circumstances and change the people around us all the time, if we can somehow try to change our own attitude in Krishna consciousness, in relationship, then that can go a long way. And Sukanya here is giving a very good example for it. So with this, we'll finish and see if we have any questions or comments or corrections. Yes.
Why did Sukanya pierce like Cyavana Muni's, like the hole? Why did she pierce it?
Yeah, sometimes kids can do naughty things, isn't it? Yeah. You know what that means. Why did they do that? You tell me. Why do kids do sometimes naughty things?
For fun?
For fun, yes. Yeah. So sometimes Sukanya was still young, and she did it out of fun, out of curiosity, and she was just like, okay, glowworm, let's poke it, let's see what happens. Wasn't a good idea. It's a bad idea. Yeah. So. But once you do naughty things, then you be prepared for the consequences. Yes.
That's why I don't do naughty things, so I don't have to prepare for the consequences.
Okay, that's good.
I try to.
You try to. Good. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Granth-raj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Hare.